Even if you're skinny, you might get type 1 diabetes. Like, oh my God, you're so lean. How did you get type 1? And it's like, well, that has nothing to do with your body composition. It's your autoimmune system. You don't get type 1 diabetes from eating sugar. Also, it is an autoimmune condition. I really don't like the whole you can't eat this and you can't eat this. I think the more you tell yourself you can and you can't, you put yourself in those boxes, you're just like setting yourself up for like epic failure. So it's not so much that there's certain foods that you can't eat. I think it's more about making intentional decisions. So when people say, oh, you're diabetic, you probably can't eat that.
You're listening to Wake Up and Read the Labels, your guide to eating simple and feeling good. If you want to eat clean and feel your best, guess what? You're in the right place. Each week, we talk about ingredients that may be holding you back from feeling your best. We also talk to some brands that are going against the grain and actually using real ingredients we can recognize. Plus, we're sharing stories with people who are just like you, who actually woke up and read the labels. Welcome to Wake Up and Read the Labels podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to Sarah Bristow, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2014, so about 10 years ago. And now she empowers individuals living with diabetes to take charge of their health and well-being. Welcome, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. Excited to be here, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Most people don't realize this, but you and I have been knowing each other, I guess. I know I've been married for 15 years. You got married before that. So you want to tell listeners how long we've been knowing each other and how we know each other?
Yeah, you were at our wedding. I remember Seth was like, I'm bringing a girl. And we couldn't wait to meet her. And it was you all these years later. So my husband, Austin, obviously, and Seth have been great friends for college roommates. So they shared the college lifestyle together, and now they kind of share the family lifestyle together, which is really awesome. But I have to tell you, Jen, I have this like great story of you and Seth. You guys were coming through Atlanta one time, and it was Super Bowl Sunday. And I remember, and this was like well into I had been diagnosed, but I was definitely like well into like my clean eating journey, like taking care of myself, trying not to feed my kids all the junk, all the things. And it was Super Bowl Sunday, and Austin was like, Seth and Jen are here. They're staying downtown. Let's have them come over for dinner. I was like, awesome. Let's have them come over. Like, I can cook some food, whatever. We'll watch the game. And so Austin called Seth, and he was like, hey, you guys should come over. I want you guys to watch the game. And Seth was like, all right, sweet. Like, what do you guys think you're going to cook up for dinner? And I was like, let's cook let's like grill some chicken. Like, I can make a big salad, whatever. And Austin's like, no, I mean, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Like, no one wants to eat like salad and grilled chicken on Super Bowl Sunday. So Seth ends up coming back to Austin and being like, hey man, I think we're just going to stay downtown. He's like, Jen is like kind of crazy about what she eats. Like, she doesn't eat like wings and she doesn't eat that kind of stuff. So like, you guys do your thing and we're just going to stay, downtown. When Austin tells you that, I'm like, why didn't you tell him? I was trying to make salad and grilled chicken for dinner. She would have loved that.
That's hilarious. Still to this day, 10 years later, I am skipping out on plans if it does not include clean food. So I appreciate that. I remember showing up and you had small kids. I'm like, wow, they are peeling carrots and cutting up broccoli. This is awesome. It's hard to find friends like that. So I'm excited. So tell me, Sarah, when was your diagnosis with type 1 diabetes and what was that like for you? What was your lifestyle like before that as well?
Yeah, so I was always super healthy. I've always been really active, exerciser. I like to think of myself as like an amateur endurance athlete. I'm always up for big, long run, big, long bike rides. So that's kind of always been a part of our life. So during my second pregnancy with Parker in 2014, I got a call on Halloween. I did that, what is it, the 3 hour or the 1 hour glucose test or whatever. And they called me and they were like, it was on Halloween, which is ironic, the candy holiday. And they were like, you have gestational diabetes. And I was like, what? I didn't even take the 3 hour test. And they're like, your numbers are off the charts. Like, you have gestational diabetes. You need to get in here. We're just going to give you some medicine and it's going to be just fine. And I was like, okay. I mean, I knew like nothing about diabetes, So that was October, obviously. And then Parker was born in January. And relatively healthy pregnancy, like learning to balance your blood sugar, going from like 0 to 100 miles per hour, trying to figure out how to do that was quite challenging. I was not really satisfied with the comment of like, just take the medicine and everything will be fine, especially like during this pregnancy. So she was born in 2014, ended up being like an emergency C-section. Like a lot was kind of going wrong at the end. And I think it's because I was malnourished, because I don't think I was told the right thing to do during my pregnancy from the Diabetes Resource Center that was, going to be so helpful. I don't feel like they really led me. They didn't do me any favors. So she was born in January, and sort of my follow-up appointments, they were like, we think everything's gone away. Only 1% of gestational diabetes turns into type 1. Okay. It's all going to go away. You have nothing to worry about. So I was like, okay, great. So, that summer we had been out west, we were in Idaho, it was high desert. And I just remember being like, I am so thirsty. I can hardly do anything. And a friend of mine now, looking back at it, she's a nurse now. She's like, that summer you would walk into my house and you would just get a cup of ice and you would just start like chewing on ice. So when they dismissed me from the hospital and Parker was born, I had some follow-up appointments, and they sort of said, if you experience any of these, textbook symptoms, if you have extreme thirst, extreme weight loss, extreme fatigue, metallic taste in your mouth, if you have any of these things, muscle soreness, come in and see us. But it sort of went in one ear and out the next. And I was like, I am done with this diabetes thing. I'm fine. But that summer, all of those symptoms sort of crept back in, but I sort of had an excuse for everything. I was like, oh, we're in the high desert. That's why I'm thirsty. I have 2 young kids. That's why I'm tired all the time. So I was out there like running. I ran 2 races that summer, these like endurance events. And I just remember being like, man, I am like really out of shape. Like I cannot get back in shape after this baby. So we ended up coming home that summer, and I ran another race in October up in the mountains of North Georgia. And I just remember crossing the finish line, and I was like, something is not right. And Austin was like, I think you're just tired, but if you think you need to go talk to somebody, like call your endocrinologist, see what you can do. So that was like on a Sunday, and I called them the next day, and they were like, oh, you have an appointment on Tuesday. It would be 6 months since we saw you last, so come on in. So I went in that day, and they checked my blood sugar, and my blood sugar was 548. Like wow. Average is 80 to 120. Okay. So in that moment, they checked me. I was, 548. And I just remember the woman who checked my sugars looked at me and she said, it's okay. You're in the right place. And I was wow. For what, And so yeah. I spent that entire afternoon. I was by myself. Austin was not with me, in the endocrinologist's office, and we're leaving there at like 7:30 that night and calling Austin and being like, I have type 1 diabetes. And he was like, okay, we'll figure it out.
And is type 1, is that something you're born with? Is that genetic?
So type 1 is autoimmune. So basically your body kind of starts to attack itself. And your pancreas no longer produces insulin that you need to sort of regulate what you eat. So type 2, and there's so much confusion around this, I think. And before I was diagnosed, I certainly didn't know this, but type 2 is very, very genetic. Type 2 can be controlled by exercise and diet for the most part. Whereas type 1, you can eat the healthiest diet that you possibly could, but you're still going to need insulin. You're still going to be insulin dependent. So there's not, you at some point will need to be taking insulin supplement, or injectable insulin to manage, no matter how kind of healthy your lifestyle is.
Clean eating is confusing. Let's make it simple. I got you covered with my new Read the Labels app. Just head to the App Store, search for Read the Labels app, and start scanning your groceries to see if they're clean or not clean.
Okay, so do you believe that a lot of autoimmune is triggered by something? Do you think potentially type 1 is triggered by something, or yours was triggered by something?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think it was dormant. Like, was I born with it? I don't know. Like, I certainly didn't have the signs of it. When I had my first pregnancy with Webb in 2011, I didn't pass the 1-hour glucose test, but I did pass the 3-hour glucose test. Okay. So I later had, more of the functional medicine doctors have been like, you never should have been released with the blood sugar that high after a 3-hour mark, you never should have been released from their watchful eye. So I think that the second pregnancy probably did trigger it. I think, I don't know. I sort of just feel like if that is like your destiny, if you're going to get something like that, then you being as healthy as I am, if that was sort of just like part of my story, then that is just kind of like part of my story. It's nowhere in my family. Like no one even knew what diabetes was before I was diagnosed. So it's not genetic in that sense. I think I do not worry about my kids getting it. I mean, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about if I have it as a parent or my kid's going to get it. I worry about a lot of things as a parent, but that is just not one of them. I can sort of compartmentalize somehow. I do think that a lot of autoimmunes are triggered by an event. I think in my case, it was this pregnancy.
Okay. So what is the first thing you did then when you walked out? I mean, did they give you a piece of paper and tell you what to eat, what not to eat? You got prescribed medication? Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I just remember being like, okay, I'll get this like figured out, And so they gave me, a lot of times when you have gestational diabetes, they'll give you a type of pill that's an insulin. But once you sort of have the diagnosis, you go to more of an injectable insulin. So he gave me some, so you have two different types. If you're on injectables, manual or daily injections, you have a long lasting insulin, which you'll take one shot of in the morning that will last you 24 hours. And then you have a fast acting insulin that you administer every single time you eat. So if you take what's called MDI, manual daily injections, then you take two different types of insulin. If you're on an insulin pump, which I am now, it is like a slow drip of that fast-acting insulin all day long into your system. So you don't take the long-lasting insulin. So, I mean, he gave me like a vial of insulin and he was like, okay, so he walked me through like what my insulin to carb ratio was, how many units he thought I should start with. I mean, it is like a shot in the dark when you get started. You're like, I think I'm going to give myself this many units. You do have like a little bit of a honeymoon phase in the beginning. So I like to think of it as like your pancreas is like starting to run out of gas. So like when you run out of gas, you sort of like, you might like putter a little bit before you actually run out of gas. So that's kind of what your pancreas is doing. It might like shoot out a little bit of insulin, like a little bit here and there. So you might not be completely insulin dependent at that point, but you ultimately will be. So I went to the pharmacy and I picked up some insulin. I picked up some syringes and I picked up some testing strips, and some of that stuff I had from my gestational diabetes journey. And I just started like reading. I mean, I dug into research. Like I've always been a very like health conscious, give me the information, let me absorb it, let me consume it, let me read it. But I like dove in. My whole family did, because everybody was like, how on earth did this happen to someone who is like ultimately so healthy? But type 1 doesn't really matter if you're healthy or not. It's like your pancreas is not working, your body is attacking itself. So I was on the finger prick. You check your finger, you prick your finger however many times a day you need to. In the beginning, it was probably 10 times a day. Within a couple of months, probably, I got on a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, which I still wear to this day. I see people wearing them all the time now.
Oh, wow. I wear them and promote them. Yeah.
They're so interesting. They're
informative. They're so they help even people that don't have diabetes make a more personalized diet. Because I tell people all the time, like, you could eat a bowl of ice cream and I could eat a bowl of ice cream and our blood sugars are going to do completely different things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's fascinating. I think people think foods that they're like, it's really healthy, it's fat free, or whatever, Yeah. Then you're like, yeah, it's still wreaking havoc on your blood sugar, Right. And I think paying attention to how you feel when you're at these different levels. Like someone else's baseline they might feel really good when they're 80 to 100. Someone else might feel really good when they're like 120 to 130, depending on what your level of activity is, et cetera. Yeah. So then I stayed on injections for a while, and then I eventually went to a pump, and I've kind of been on and off different pumps in the past, 11 years. But I just started to consume the information. I just started to one of my very favorite books is called Think Like a Pancreas. And it is, for anyone who is type 1, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, because it talks about, you hear acronyms all the time, like MDI, CGM, long-lasting, basal, bolus, and you're just like, I don't know what any of these things are. And so just it's like breaks down the vocabulary. It talks about like why, like what the beta cells are doing, what your pancreas is doing, why it's not working anymore. So I just started to take all that information in. And then the next thing I did was I was like, I'm still going to be active. Like, I'm not going to let this like get in the way of my active lifestyle. And so I registered for a 100-mile bike race with the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, which I later came to find out they focus more on type 2, and Breakthrough T1D, formerly JDRF, focuses more on type 1 research. So I now ride with the Breakthrough T1D cycling team. Actually just completed an event last weekend with them I'll tell you about. But I signed up for this big bike race. I was like, I'm going to train and I'm going to find a way to stay active and learn how to manage diabetes. And that's what I've done.
Okay, so what are some myths about diabetes that we can debunk in a sense? People may think that either...
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, what are some myths? You
I love
probably
it. Okay.
hit them all.
Yeah. Okay, so type 1... you don't get diabetes. You don't get type 1 diabetes because you eat too much sugar. And you don't get diabetes. You don't get even if you're skinny, you might get type 1 diabetes. So I think those are two right there. Like, people are like, oh my God, you're so lean. How did you get type 1? And it's like, well, that has nothing to do with your body composition. It's your autoimmune system, and you don't get diabetes. You don't get type 1 diabetes from eating sugar. Also, it is an autoimmune condition. I really don't like the whole you can't eat this and you can't eat this. I think the more you tell yourself you can and you can't, and you put yourself in those boxes, you're just like setting yourself up for like epic failure. So it's not so much that there's certain foods that you can't eat. I think it's more about making intentional decisions. So when people say, oh, you're diabetic, you probably can't eat that. I'm like, no, it's not that I can't eat it. It's that I don't choose to like eat cake on a Tuesday or whatever it is, So I think the sugar, being, what your weight, having a lot to do with it, what you can and can't eat has a lot to do with it. When people say things like, oh, you probably can't do that because you're diabetic. I'm like, there's two things in the world that they say you cannot do as a diabetic. You can't go to space and you can't scuba dive. But scuba diving is now, somehow it's recently been approved as something you can do as a diagnosed type 1 diabetic. So if the only thing in life I can't do is go to outer space, then I'm okay with that,
I'm with you. I don't want to go to outer space. So
yeah, I think I'm good. I think I'm good here. Trying to think what else. Like, really, it's just like the limiting beliefs that people have about, oh, you probably can't do this. You can't do that.
Do you think there's a lot of people living with type 1 diabetes that don't know that they have it?
No, I mean, I think that the symptoms start to present in such an aggressive way that you would know. Like, you would lose. I mean, when I was first diagnosed, I was like relatively new to teaching yoga or to yoga. I was not teaching yet. But I was, a yogi, and I started going to 3 or 4 classes a week, not even like hot yoga. And I was like rail thin. I mean, I'm 5'11" and I was like 120 pounds. And I just remember being like, man, yoga really does a body good, but like, I didn't actually look that good. I mean, I looked like I looked sick, I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back on it, I can confidently say that. So I think if you're ignoring those symptoms, then something's really wrong, because the symptoms get such that you can't like turn your back on it. Like, you're so tired, your muscles just like hurt, like every step you take. The insatiable thirst. I'm talking like you drink an entire jug of water and then you're like, pass me a Gatorade, and you drink that whole thing and then you're like, where is the juice? Like, it's kind of like hard to even imagine feeling that way.
Okay, so let's break down blood sugar management for all people. Is having type 1 diabetes all about blood sugar management? Is that like the objective here?
I mean, yes and no. Like, you need to keep your blood sugar. So your blood sugar is measured by a daily measure. You can measure it how many times a day you want to. Your fasting blood sugar, when you wake up in the morning, after not having eaten anything for, let's say, 12 hours, you want it to be between 80 and 120. So, if you wake up really high, that might just be diabetes doing diabetes, or it might be that you ate a late meal and your body didn't give yourself enough insulin to like kind of bring it down. So you do want to keep those numbers in range, but there is so much more to diabetes than just your number. So they also look at what's called your A1C, which is a snapshot of your blood sugar, your average blood sugar over the last 3 months. So, if your blood sugar is 5 or higher, you're like, you have diabetes, you need help. Anything above, I would say like 6.0, they are watching you like a hawk, because it should not be that high if you're not diabetic. And then less than 5, I think some type 1s have A1Cs of less than 5, or less than 4, 5 point, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. So your blood sugar is one way to determine like how well you're managing your diabetes. But I think there's also the burden of diabetes is so intense that you really have to make sure that you are taking care of your mental health. And I think that involves like, are you happy? What about your relationships? Like, do you feel supported with those that love you and you spend time with? Do you, just where the place where you work, do they support your diabetes? Are they understanding of things? Are you able to exercise? Like, so sort of all the like holistic things that come along with blood sugar management, from my perspective, are equally as important, because if you're stressed all the time, stress wreaks havoc on your blood sugar. Like, I don't know if you ever noticed that when you wore the CGM, but like when you have your moments of like, oh my gosh, I'm losing it, you just like literally can watch this line like going straight up. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think stress is one of the most like toxic things that we can do, for our body. But in terms of managing your blood sugar, that's really intense. So I think that when you look at all of the other areas of your life, how much sleep are you getting? How much water are you drinking? Of course, like what are the foods you're eating? So all of those things I think are equally as important when it comes to managing the whole big picture of diabetes and just blood sugar management in general.
Okay. So how, I guess let's take us into your typical day. What are you eating? Do you eat carbs?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead with that.
So I've like put myself into a lot of different boxes at different times. And after lots of years, I've realized that is like not what you do, like when I was first diagnosed, I really ate like kale and chicken, like all the time. That was like all I ate. My blood sugar was like, this nice flat line on the CGM.
Is that because you were like scared? You were scared to eat?
Yeah. I was just kind of like, it's easy. You don't have to take a lot of insulin. So you take insulin for carbohydrates. You don't really take insulin for protein. It depends on the combinations of the nutrients, but like you're just eating greens and protein or vegetables and protein, you need like very little insulin. So it's just easier to like not take insulin, because then you didn't have to worry about going high or going low and having to correct it.
Okay. Are you also keeping like a journal of the nutrition facts?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I had like, I don't anymore, but in the beginning, I had like
that anymore.
Okay. But there's different ways you can log it. Like the technology is so advanced now. Like I can go through and look at like my, like I can look at my pump, my pod, and I can look at like all my numbers. It's wild. You can see like, okay, in the past 24 hours, I was within these 2 lines. So I was sure it was right in check, and you can add in what foods you ate if you want to. So I don't do that now because it can really start to weigh you down. And I trust myself. I know my patterns. I know my habits. If I'm high, I can usually say, you know what, I should have dosed that plate probably had about 15 more carbs on it than I was expecting, and typically if you pay really good attention, then you do know like kind of where you might make an error. I do a lot of journaling, not always about like what I eat, but I think like, again, it kind of comes back to like the big picture of things. So when I wake up in the morning, you want to be between 80 and 120. I'm like kind of 100 to start the day. Like if I'm usually like kind of right at 100. And then I'm on insulin pump now, so I can pause my insulin if I want to. So I usually work out in the morning. So I may or may not pause my insulin. Like if I'm lifting weights, I don't usually need to pause it. But if I'm going for a run for like 50 minutes, I'll pause it. So then it's just not delivering you your, the basal rate while you're running. And then I eat breakfast. I have sort of like dabbled with intermittent fasting before. It's just a really hard concept too. I love the idea of fasting. I'm usually a 12-hour fast overnight, just sort of like naturally. I love the idea of like a 14-hour fast, but it just gets really tricky because if you get low, you have to eat something and then you sort of broken the fast and then it sort of turns into this like a little bit of a mind game, Okay. So for breakfast, I'm usually like a lower carbohydrate breakfast just because I like eggs in the morning. I might make a smoothie like full of, vegetables and all the good stuff. I might have like I just don't eat like super high carb things because you're just kind of like playing with fire. Like if I really wanted it, I would. But if I watch Austin make these like big bowls of oatmeal with like bananas and, berries, and then he'll put like maple syrup on it. And I'm like, that looks like really, really good.
It's like
but
a
that's
bomb
just
explosion.
That's just like not really a great move.
Do you know that oats spike your blood sugar more than ice cream?
I've heard you say that before. I've heard you be like, oats. No.
Yeah, you need to also tell Austin oats are high in omega-6s, so it's promoting inflammation, and they're also high in phytic acid. Now, you could bring your blood sugar down if he's adding like fiber on top of it with, or if he's pairing it with protein or something like that. But maple syrup and oats, I'm like screaming.
I know. Yeah, so I like more protein in the morning. I mean, I'm really, I'm like 40, 43, kind of moving into that like perimenopause, or I'm in that perimenopause phase. So I'm really like trying to be intentional with my protein. I mean, you can just like feel it, like when your protein, I think, and not always animal protein. Like I eat animal protein, but not a ton. But I just think, I think a balanced meal is so great, and then I eat lunch pretty early, like a big salad with some sort of like protein for lunch is what I have like every single day. I told Parker last night, I'm like, I was like, let's have some salad with your dinner. She's like, Mom, it's easy for you to say because you eat salad for 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love salad, but I don't make boring salads. I make like fun salads, like full of like the good stuff, like whatever that may be, whatever I'm feeling.
A colorful salad.
Yes, eat the rainbow. And then in the afternoon, I'll usually have like an apple and peanut butter in the afternoon kind of go, almond butter. I love that. And then for dinner, we do a lot of vegetables, a lot of salad. I usually have a protein for the, an animal protein for the other folks in the fam. We eat fish a lot. So we definitely eat like a very balanced meal, like on the healthier side of most people. I'm not a huge snacker. I try not to be a huge snacker because I do think in order to like use your insulin effectively, if you like dose with your lunch and then you eat something again an hour later and you dose more, then you're stacking your insulin. And so then the more you stack your insulin, the more likely you are to like tank in the afternoon. And I like to be hungry when I go into a meal. And I think a lot of times we don't realize it, but we're not hungry when we start meals because we've been snacking all afternoon, but then you still sit down and eat this huge plate of dinner and you're like, I don't even know if I was hungry, Yeah. So that's something I like really kind of try and work on. But I really try to eat balanced, to try and like eat intuitively. Like, what am I feeling? Like what really feels like it's going to taste good right now, Because I think our bodies are really smart. I think if we listen to them, they offer a lot of great information, Something else on that I think you will really appreciate is like when we go out to a restaurant. I mean, I heard you say one time you'll get up and walk out of a restaurant if you don't like what's on the menu. And I love that because people have their sort of the ideas in their head of like what these really healthy restaurants are. But it's like, let me tell you that salad right there. I don't know what's in it, but my blood sugar goes from like 100 to like 300. There's something in that blood sugar or in that salad that's messing with your blood sugar, whatever it is.
So I heard you talk about a lot. In the beginning, you were tracking your quantities, right? And your nutrition facts and the carbs, things like that. How important is it to you to find high quality food versus the quantity? Like, does the quality matter? I guess it kind of does because you just said when you go out to eat and you're getting a salad, it'll spike your blood sugar.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
That's more of like a personal preference. I think like I care about what goes into my body. You know what I mean? Because I think that, if you can't pronounce it.
Yeah.
If you can't pronounce it. Oh yeah. If you can't pronounce it, it doesn't, you don't need to be eating it. That's what Michael Pollan says in his food rules. He's like, if your grandma's never heard of it, then don't eat it.
Uh-huh.
I like that. I like that. So I do think that the quality of food matters. I mean, I think if you're going to eat organic kale versus not organic kale, I don't think that's going to impact your blood sugar, but that's sort of like a personal, like I feed my family the best that we can because I want them to feel their best. And I think you feel better when you eat better food.
Are you wanting to eat better, but this clean eating thing's just a bit overwhelming? Maybe you just don't know what to cook, or you don't know how to find the clean product swaps at the grocery store. Well, I want to make this simple for you. You can get clean swaps and an anti-inflammatory recipe delivered to your inbox every Saturday by going to thelabelletter.com.
Well, I want to introduce you and the listeners to a place that has the highest qualities greens. Okay. It's called what's it called? The Chef's Garden. Give me a second. I'm Googling this. The Chef's Garden by Farmer. He was just on my podcast. The Chef's Garden. FarmerJonesFarm.com. I got so sick and tired of going to the grocery store and my apples not tasting like apples, green onions not tasting like green onions, right? And just the lettuce looking almost icky, just pale. They all look pale. I'm like, this is not right. Something's going on. So I did a quick Google search on regenerative organic vegetables, and this website popped up, and I was like, you know what? I'm trying it. I didn't even read anything about it. I was like, I'm just going to order it. Well, it arrives to me, and it is so fresh. The color and the taste was just like, it was mind blowing. I didn't taste a green onion that tastes like that in many, many years. And so, again, I didn't do any research on them, but I emailed them and I was like, I'm so impressed at your vegetable box. I want to put you guys on my podcast. Well, this funny farmer comes on my podcast. I don't know. He's 60 something years old, and he's been farming. I think
I watched this one.
Yeah, he's been farming his whole life. He's doing a show with Rachel Ray, and he supplies all the Four Seasons, St. Regis, Ritz-Carlton hotels nationwide, all their greens and their vegetables. And he does third-party testing, and he said that his stuff has 200 to 300 times more nutrition than what we're finding at the grocery store. Yes, but yes, it sounds alarming. It's just that by the time your food gets to the grocery, it has like zero nutrition, because I think it goes down like 15% every day. It loses its nutrition every day. It's sitting on the shelf or it's in transportation. So anyway, look him up. It's amazing. Like, you know how usually when you get a shipment of food, especially greens, it'll come soggy. This was not the case. This stays good for a week, and it's like, it's mind blowing how well it is.
Okay, I'm gonna look into it. I love it.
Yeah.
We get a farm box here called Fresh Harvest, and it's really good stuff. It's like, you know, you can meet the farmers if you want to, local, mostly organic, and it tastes different.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no denying the fact that it tastes different. I do think my sister is, she's done a lot of research in the past about like the quality of soil and how that really impacts the nutrients, you know, and the food that we eat. And I just think that like the way of the world makes it harder in some ways to do, to eat healthy, but it doesn't really. It's like, if you're committed to it, you just have to like find a way. I think that's one of the things that I've gleaned from you the most is like, you find a way, it comes with a price tag. It comes with like a lot of effort. It comes with a messy kitchen a lot of the time, but you feel the difference. And, if your goal is to remain healthy, then there's ways to do it, but it does take work, but that's obviously a priority for you and a priority for me. So,
So what would you say is the number one thing that people with type 1 diabetes face daily? Is it being obsessed over food? Is it living in fear? Is it living without fear? Is it worry how to celebrate when they go to celebrations? Because I know here in America, we only celebrate with sugar, but like, what is it?
I know. I would say just like the day-to-day burden. Like, when you think about like like my friend that I run with in the morning, we always talk about like the layers, and she'll be like, oh, and another layer is it like my dad is really sick. And then another layer is like this at work, they're that, whatever. So then like, it's a layer that is constant, that never goes away. The mental burden and like the fact of like you potentially feeling burnout and not wanting to deal with it anymore, but not having an option other than to deal with it is really intense. And I think everyone who has type 1 diabetes has had like a lot of highs and lows. We sort of joke around with the term highs and lows, because it's like your blood sugar highs and lows. And then you have your emotional highs and lows, So I think my, when I coach people who are type 1, like what I say to them when they're just like, I'm feeling burnout, it's like, okay, what's one thing we can change? You don't have the option to just like stop caring or stop, doing what you need to do. So maybe if you're on finger prick, maybe you need to try a CGM. Maybe if you're on the CGM, you want a break, go back to finger pricks. Maybe you switch between the pump and the manual daily injections. Maybe you start, if you eat like a low carbohydrate, high protein breakfast, maybe switch that up. Maybe try having your carbs in the morning. There's like these little things that we can do and it takes work and it takes thought. But when we start to feel that feeling of burnout and really feeling the burden of diabetes, it's like, it's not an option to just say, I'm not going to care about it today. What you have to do is like, okay, what can I do next? You have to take action, find a way to, to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I know you were doing coaching, or you are doing coaching. Can you let me know how you're helping other people that are going through the same struggle?
Yeah, so I've been a health coach for, about 8 years, but just recently, I've sort of been feeling this pull towards doing more work in the diabetes space. So just this fall, I've launched Thrive Coaching, and I'm focusing on working with individuals and families who are supporting type 1. So if you are an individual with type 1, or if you have a family member who is type 1, like a lot of parents. I have a background in education, so I work with a bunch of kids. So coaching parents and how ways that they can successfully support their kid who is type 1. So the health coaching piece has felt, that's kind of been a part of my wheelhouse for a long time, but working just with diabetics is relatively new. I've worked with diabetics throughout the years, but it feels really good to be focusing on just doing that work. I feel passionate about it. I feel like, from your background, not necessarily being in coaching and being in food, it's like you learn from experience and you learn from immersing yourself in this. And in my position, it's like I have this. So you go to the doctor who's not diabetic, and they're trying to tell you how to manage your blood sugar. It's like, I guarantee you're going to learn a lot more from someone who actually is diabetic,
Yeah.
Not to say that doctors don't have a place in all this, they're the ones to prescribe our medicine. They have great insight into all this, but I think that the another layer is the support layer for diabetics is really important.
For sure. So do you want to share a story about maybe one of your clients through Thrive Coaching?
Yeah. Okay. So it's about a year ago. So this older woman came to me, and she was actually one of my yoga clients who's also an OB. She put me in touch with this woman who she was like, I really think that she could just use some support. She was actually pre-diabetic. And so she was I think the biggest win. So I worked with her. We did 8 sessions over about 4 weeks, I'd say 4 or 5 weeks. And I think the most impactful thing that she learned was that she was not allowing herself to live because she was so worried about her numbers. She was like, I'm going away on this birthday weekend. It is all of my best friends from growing up. I'm just so worried about my numbers. I was like, you got to step away from that worry for a moment, knowing that you're going to make some great decisions because you have that in you, because you care. So you're already going to make good decisions. But if you want to have a glass of champagne and eat the cake, have a glass of champagne and eat the cake, So I think I helped her sort of zoom out of looking at the constant numbers all the time and look at the big picture of her happiness, her relationships, her, sort of her approach to living her daily life. And I gave her some tips okay, after you eat the cake, go for a walk, just some little things that you can do. But I just remember her calling me and being like, I had the best time and my numbers were in range. I'm like, right, because your stress level was low and you were enjoying yourself. You didn't feel like you were depriving yourself of anything, So I think that's really important. I think about her a lot just because she was like, oh my God, it doesn't have to be all consuming all the time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So for everyone listening, if you or someone that is struggling with type 1 diabetes, go check out Sarah's website. It'll be linked beneath Thrive Coaching. You can also check her out on social media, which will be linked. And Sarah, I appreciate you helping others, sharing your story, and offering coaching to them. It was great talking to you. And
yeah, you too.
Keep being amazing.
Yeah, you too. You do the same. All right, great to see you, Jen.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wake Up and Read the Labels. If you like this episode, guess what? We want you to share it. We'd love that. Share it with a friend and leave us a review. You can subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or really wherever you're listening to your podcast. For more information, visit us at wakeupandreadthelabels.com.